In this video, I'll show you 25 expert tips that you can use to improve your ability at Minecraft survival games. For the first tip, you want to always make sure to participate in the map vote. Voting on the map may seem to be inconsequential, but when you think about it, if you have experience with one map, or you know where the chests are, or you just think you're better overall at that map, voting for that map is definitely a good idea. My second tip revolves around the chests in the middle of the map. As many of you will know, these central chests contain the most valuable and important items in the game, but you're going to have a lot of competition from other players to get there. So, fortunately, what you can do is on the Lifeboat server, they have a teleporter kit that lets you use an ender pearl to get there faster. And even on other servers where that kit may not be available, you do generally want to get to that central chest area as soon as you possibly can, because that way you can get the best loot. But getting the best loot isn't going to help you if you can't even see who's attacking you. So in order to make that easy, just use third-person view and then you can see who's behind you at all times. It's also important to loot as many chests as possible as early as possible. Doing this will allow you to get your hands on lots more good loot, and it will also prevent other players from being able to access that same loot. So if they went out of their way to look for a specific chest, they will have wasted their time. But speaking of wasting time, it's probably a good idea not to go looking into random rooms for chests. As you can see, I went through quite a few rooms here, but there wasn't a chest in any one of them. So it probably would have been better if one of the maps I had voted for had actually won. But something that won't waste your time is subscribing to my channel, because I will be uploading plenty more minigame videos and tutorial videos this year. So if you do think that that's something you're interested in, please go ahead and subscribe. It's completely free, and you can always unsubscribe at any time later. But the next tip is going to revolve around organization. You see, if you are more organized than your opponent, you will likely be able to do things faster and more efficiently and have the upper hand over them. So I recommend that you organize your inventory by placing items in places where you will find them most usable and easily accessible. So obviously you're going to want a sword in your hotbar, and you'll probably also want some golden apples, ender pearls, flint and steel, and other possibly useful items. But what if you don't think you have any useful items? Well, as it turns out, with just a little bit of thinking, you might realize that some items are more useful than they appear. For example, axes can be better than swords. An iron axe actually deals 2 or 3 more damage than a golden sword. So you really have to think about each item and think about what item might be best, even if it doesn't look so good on the surface. And in fact, there's 2 special cases where axes may in fact be much better than a sword. First is on Java Edition, axes actually do more damage than swords. They do have a slower attack cooldown, but it depends on your playstyle whether or not you think that will be an issue. Whereas if you're on a server that is a survival server or something that lets you break blocks, then an axe can be more useful than a sword, because an axe will allow you to do damage while still allowing you to break some more blocks with it. And if you find an axe enchanted with sharpness 2 or sharpness 3, then it will do more damage than a sword made out of the same material. But swords and axes can only go so far. After all, you do need some kind of defensive items, and armor is a good thing for that. It's always good to have some iron armor, leather armor, and gold armor. But you never know what kind of armor you're going to get unless you do end up starting with a kit that gives you armor. So there's a few other defensive items that I like, though. And obviously some servers, they give you more coal or they give you more resources. But I personally recommend that you go out of your way to get ender pearls and golden apples, because these are the 2 most useful defensive items. An ender pearl allows you to quickly escape any fight that's going wrong, and a golden apple allows you to save the day, regenerate some health, and possibly give you another chance. And especially if you can get an enchanted golden apple, that will greatly improve your odds of surviving for the entire game, or at least making it to the final 2. Now, another thing I recommend, though, also relates to food. You see, golden apples aren't the only food source. There's loads of other food sources in the game, so you have to think about what food items are good and what food items maybe are not so good for you. For example, steak and cooked pork chops are some of the best food sources you will commonly find, because they each restore 4 drumsticks worth of food, whereas some other sources, such as bread, only restore 3 drumsticks. But that's not the full story. After all, you also have to take into account Minecraft's hidden hunger statistic, saturation. As it turns out, the best food source is actually golden carrots. Even though they only restore 3 drumsticks worth of food, they have such a high saturation value that it makes them more effective than steak or golden carrots. Also, you probably don't want to be eating any raw food. But we've now reached tip number 10, and tip number 10 is pretty important because you want to prepare for the final battle. I'd consider this your most important battle because obviously this is the one that decides whether or not you win the game. And to give yourself a better chance of winning the game, I recommend eating a golden apple as soon as the battle begins, because by doing this, you give yourself just a little bit of an edge over any opponent, and usually you've got a slight amount of time to eat it before the battle will actually start. But as you can see, doing so, it looks like I was able to actually gain enough of an edge to take some damage here and still be able to eliminate this guy. Unfortunately, since my inventory was full, I couldn't pick up his items, so the recommendation in this case is to burn them instead, just so that the other player can't get them. But regardless of that, I did have enough items anyway, and as you can see, I was able to knock this guy into the lava and successfully win the game. But we're not going to dwell on that victory for too long, because as I promised, there are 25 tips in this video, and we still have 13 tips left to go, so without further ado, let's get right into the next game. As you can see, I was able to teleport up to the chest pretty quickly, but I made the mistake of dropping my leather helmet on the floor, so unfortunately that did end up costing me some time, and I ended up not getting any other items from the chests, but you know what, it's fine, because using my next tip, taking advantage of the grace period, you can actually get away from the center pretty fast. You see, the grace period not only protects you against PvP damage, but also against fall damage, and that is the way it works on most servers. I've verified that it works that way on both Lifeboat and Cubecraft, and I do believe it does on many other servers as well, but now we're going to move into the next tip, which is putting armor on directly from your hotbar. You see, this allows you to skip the time wasted that you would spend, even if you were shift-clicking it in your inventory, it's time wasted when you go into your inventory. It's a lot faster to just put it on from your hotbar. Now, my next tip only works in Bedrock Edition. I suppose you could use it in Java Edition, but you need a mod or something that would probably be considered cheating. But what you do is you want to make sure you've turned the hide paper doll setting to off. And the reason why you want that is essentially the paper doll is the thing you see in the top left corner of your screen. It's a character, it's you, and it shows you what armor you have on. So instead of having to go into third person or go into your inventory to look up what armor you have, you already know what armor you have on. And that goes in conjunction with my last tip, which is you look up at your paper doll, top left corner of the screen, and you put in the armor that you want to have on. My next tip is, of course, to avoid taking fall damage. This may seem to be pretty obvious, but a lot of people don't realize that every heart counts in PvP, every heart counts in survival games. You really don't want to avoid taking damage where it's possible to avoid it, especially something as dumb as fall damage. You just want to walk around, want to try and avoid that from happening. The only time when it might actually make sense to take fall damage is if you're running away from another player or you're jumping away from them, but even then, it's kind of something that you just want to avoid. But what you don't want to avoid is sneaking up on other players. If you can catch another player off guard, you can get in a lot of early hits and really give yourself an advantage in the upcoming fight. And that's one of the reasons why I said earlier in this video that you really need to make sure to look in third person, make sure nobody's sneaking up on you. Sneaking up on someone just gives you a huge advantage over them. And as you can see, someone snuck up on me over there. So what I recommend doing in that case, you regenerate before fighting again. If you just fought someone, you're not going to be in a good position to fight someone again. You have to regenerate a little bit and get back to an equal level with them, and that might actually give you a chance in the upcoming fight. But if they get a load of hits on you, and you've only gotten 1 or 2 on them, you might think that you have no chance whatsoever and you're just going to lose this fight. You can't keep running forever, right? Well, you can't keep running forever, but if you can get a chance, make sure to eat a golden apple wherever possible. If you can create these opportunities to get a golden apple in, that is definitely what you need, because golden apples are the key to winning fights and coming back from big losses or whatever. I was gonna cut that, but it's funny, so I'll leave it in. But anyway, we're going to move on to my next tip now, and my next tip involves lapis lazuli. You see it in the chests, you think, nah, I'll just ignore that and waste a bunch of time to grab it. But I say don't ignore lapis lazuli. We'll get to why not later, but considering that lapis lazuli only has one real purpose, you probably see where I'm going with this. My next tip is also something you shouldn't do, and that is, please don't eat in front of other players. Eating in front of another player basically just amounts to ignoring them while they hit you with their sword or whatever other weapon they have, and basically just demolish you and enjoy all the loot that you have, including probably the food that you were eating. But speaking of other players, I spotted another player over here toward the center of the map, so I figured, you know what, let's go on in, let's have a nice fight, and he actually seems to be just about equal to me on skill level, and that's the thing I like about this game, is oftentimes you'll find certain players, some are better than you, some are worse than you, but when you get to one where they're just about equal to you in skill level, it's awesome, because then you actually have an epic fight where you're both pretty close to dying, but you're also both pretty close to winning, and winning is awesome. Now, I was able to take out my iron sword, and I was able to eventually get a few good hits on him, and I was able to take him out, and that worked out pretty well for me. But one thing that perhaps wasn't so fortunate is that now my inventory is full again, and I have a bunch of useless items in my inventory, so what you want to do when you do have useless items is you throw them on the ground, and then you are able to pick up the item that you do want when it's in the big bag of loot. Speaking of loot, let's head toward the center of the map, because on the center of the map in most servers, that's where the enchantment table is located. And I see the vast majority of players, they basically just ignore enchanting. And this is where we used the lapis lazuli earlier, because actually enchanting is awesome. If you get a chance to do enchanting, it's definitely great. You always want to have a little bit extra sharpness, a little bit extra damage, knocking back other players so they can't hit you. It's such a big buff to you, and frankly, I don't see why so many people ignore it. You don't have to go out of your way to go enchanting, but it's definitely something I would recommend when you can. Another tip is that other players could be anywhere. They could be up, they could be down, they could be side to side. You don't know where they are until you see them, so you have to be prepared for someone to be anywhere. And especially if you have good gear and you want to hunt players down, you definitely want to be looking for them, because you don't want them to get good gear and then they're going to be hunting you down. And with that, we reached tip 25, but this isn't the end of the video yet. You see, as a bonus for watching this far into the video, I'm going to give you 5 extra bonus tips that I think will really help push you over the edge. If you're just a little behind winning, you can use these tips to really eke out that win. So, first tip I have for you, first bonus tip, is that if you get set on fire, it's probably a good idea to run away. Getting set on fire causes 2 problems. Obviously, you're going to take a lot of damage, but you're also going to get distracted by the huge fire animation taking up most of your screen, so it's generally just a good idea to run away from that. My second bonus tip, use ender pearls to buy yourself time. A well-thrown ender pearl can be the difference between losing and winning the game. So with that in mind, you want to use ender pearls as much as possible and whenever possible, but do be careful because they do take away 2.5 hearts time that you use them. So because of that, if you're under 3 hearts, don't use an ender pearl. You could theoretically regenerate, but it's generally not worth the risk, so that's generally something to avoid. But another thing that you might want to avoid over here is actually trying to fight multiple players at once. It sounds like a good idea, like, hey, maybe I can get 2 guys out at once, but no, because chances are they will just gang up on you, especially if they think that you're better than they are. So what you need to do is you need to pick your battles. You only fight 1 player at once, and if it's a 1v1, and if you are better, and if you are using the strategies that I give you, then you most likely will win. Hopefully you will win anyway. I mean, sometimes it will just be down to luck, but I think that if you do use these strategies, you'll usually be able to win. Usually. But with that being said, using my tip of running away from the fire here, I was able to regenerate a little bit of health. I'm also going to, use my third person tip to make sure that this guy is far enough away where he's not going to be hitting me anytime soon, and I also know his location. And I'm also going to use my ender pearl tip, so using 3 tips in 1 here today, and I'm also going to eat my golden apple and regenerate some health. This guy tried ender pearling to me, but luckily, even though he was trying to set me on fire and he actually succeeded in that, I knew I had gotten enough hits on him where I would be able to take him out without too much difficulty. And since that worked out so well, I figured, you know what, let's reward myself with a cookie. Who doesn't like a good cookie? In fact, who doesn't like 7 cookies? I love cookies. But unfortunately, I didn't have time to celebrate just yet, because, as it turns out, someone was sneaking up on me. You can see them over there, just as I was trying to eat my cookies. That's not very nice. But this guy didn't seem to be too bright. You see, he actually immolated himself, and looks like he's just trying to run away, He's not really fighting me, he's just running away. So that's probably a good decision, considering, he's on fire, he's just lost a lot of health, but he did make the mistake here of ender pearling when he had less than 3 hearts of health, so he ended up dying from fall damage, which is very, very unfortunate. But the opposite of unfortunate is fortunate, and it was very fortunate indeed that he happened to be carrying a few items of interest, namely golden apples, which I was able to drop my lapis lazuli and pick up those instead. And whoa, 7 golden apples, that's definitely going to help me in this final battle. And my 5th bonus tip is actually specific to the final battle. You see, on most of the servers where they teleport you to the middle for this showdown kind of thing, there's always usually a pit of lava around the edge, and you want to stay away from that. You actually want to try and knock the other player into that, but that actually didn't come into play this time because I was just able to get the other player with my sword, and I was able to win the match, and that actually worked out pretty well. I'm pretty happy with that. So that is going to be the end of this video here. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you liked it, please go ahead and like it. If you disliked it, please go ahead and leave a dislike. And if you do want to see more of these Minecraft uploads, then please feel free to subscribe. And you can always unsubscribe later. After all, it is free. I'm Robert Gaming, and thank you for watching.